Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're very happy to have you with us to launch the CASEL Cares webinar series in response to the extraordinary and challenging times we all find ourselves in right now as we deal with school closures, social distancing, and all the other impacts of COVID-19. More than ever, we need community, and even if that community needs to be in these virtual environments for our safety right now, it's really nice to come together. And this webinar is an opportunity for us all to learn, be together, and take a moment to step away from the stress and worries that we're all facing. We have a lot of people with us today, but we are going to invite you throughout the webinar to share your thoughts and respond to some of the questions that Marc Brackett, our speaker, is going to ask. You can respond to those questions he poses using the questions box in your control panel. Many of you have already used that to say hello, which is great. You can type your question into the box and either hit enter or click on the send link, and we'll receive that response, and we'll be sharing some of those out to the group throughout the webinar. You can use that same questions box to send in a question to Dr. Brackett. We're going to save a little time at the end for a short Q&A session, so that questions box is your friend. Just a few other quick housekeeping items before we dive in. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, you can use that questions feature to get my attention, and I'll do my best to resolve the problem for you. As many of you have been experiencing over the last week or two, internet bandwidth is really at a premium right now as everyone works from home, does video calls, webinars like we're doing, kids playing video games. So we may have issues with audio or video. We're keeping our fingers crossed that everything will go smoothly. But if you do run into lags with audio or visual transmission, one thing you can do is the classic log off, log back in, and see if that helps with the problem. And rest assured, we are recording the webinar, so if for whatever reason you missed part of it, we will be sending out a link to it. And I know some of your colleagues registered and may not have gotten a link to the webinar, and we do apologize for that. Again, we were putting this together at the last minute, and we weren't quite able to get everybody registered that we had hoped to, but we will send everybody a recording, whether they were able to join us live today or not. And we do encourage you to share the recording with your colleagues. I think it's going to be a great program. So now I'd like to introduce Karen Mimi, who's President and CEO of CASEL, and she's going to get us started.
Great. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining for our first CASEL Cares webinar, which is also falling on the inaugural International SEL Day, hosted by Urban Assembly, our dear friend and board member, David Adams, as well as SEL for US. We are in the middle of some really very extraordinary times, as you all know. And in moments like these, the need to keep physical distance makes social and emotional connectedness all the more important. In response to this critical worldwide uptick in interest and the requests that we've had from so many people around the world, we are launching a CASEL Cares initiative. The goal of the initiative is to hear what you all think you need to learn about, hear about, and hear from, and create opportunities for conversation and for support as we work our way through this challenge together. You all completed a survey when you were registering, and we will be using the survey results to help inform the future programming, and we invite you to continue to do that as this initiative evolves. Thank you again for joining, and I'd like to turn it over to CASEL's board chair, Dr. Tim Schreiber.
Thanks, Karen, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for me on behalf of the board and on behalf of the entire CASEL community, which includes all of you, to welcome you, to thank Marc, Dr. Marc Brackett, for being willing to launch this new effort to extend and expand the influence of social emotional learning in this, as Karen has said, these new and difficult environments. I think there's just a few words I'd like to say about Marc. First is that he's an extraordinarily good friend. And I think in these moments and in these times, we're all mindful of how important our friends are and how important it is for those who reach out and connect with us, those who care enough to say hi, those who extend an arm, a willing set of eyes or hands in whatever way we can. So Marc, thank you for being a good friend to me and to so many others. I'd say, secondly, Marc, as you know, has been a genius of understanding the difference if I can put it this way, between physical distancing and social distancing. I don't want to disagree with the authorities in play in our country, but I think this is a moment actually to increase physical distance, but reduce social distance. Yes, hand washing, yes, physical distance, all the precautions. Please stay home. Please take care of yourselves. We all know people now, young and old, who are getting sick. It's terrifying. We have to follow the advice and do everything we can to help healthcare practitioners, but that does not include social emotional distancing. In fact, the opposite is what we need right now, and Marc's going to talk about this. Third point I want to make quickly is that Marc has always understood that parents are the first teachers of social and emotional lessons. And right now we've got millions of parents all over the world who are looking their 5 and 6 and 8 and 12 and 14 and 16 and 18-year-olds in the eye and saying, how do I communicate, connect with you? How do I become an agent that allows you to regulate your emotions, to understand your emotions, to label your emotions, to express your emotions, to recognize your emotions? This is our chance as a field to take seriously the urgency of equipping parents with the best social and emotional learning strategies so that they too can become the partners we've always envisioned them to be of the learning and education process, so that they too can support our children in developing optimally. So Marc, I want to thank you for being a friend. I want to thank you for being a teacher to all of us. I want to thank you for recognizing the role that parents play. I want to thank you in this particular time for helping us to reduce social distance, even as we confront the fears and anxieties that require physical distance. Over to you, Marc. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate that intro. So as you heard from my good friend Tim and Karen, welcome everybody. My name is Marc Brackett, and I'm a proud board member of CASEL. And my 2 day jobs are, I am the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence, and I'm a professor at the Yale Child Studies Center. And as you heard from Karen, we decided to launch this webinar series and include a survey. And the reason why we included a survey is we want to be responsive to all of your needs. And it was very interesting to me that I would say of all the responses, and we had 5,000 people complete the survey, just an overwhelming number of people asked for strategies to deal with stress, strategies to deal with building and maintaining their relationships. I don't know about you, but there's a new contract out that I've seen, and that new contract is I'm not someone who works from home very often, and so I have a new contract with my family, which is we spend all day together. And for the last 2 weeks, we have been in our home, doing what we're told to be doing in terms of creating that physical distance. And it has just been a very interesting experience. And I'm sure many of you can relate. Like in the hallways, do I smile? Do we say hello this time? Who's cooking dinner? Who's cleaning up dinner? Anyway, it's brought a new appreciation to me for the development of social and emotional learning. So the title of my presentation today is Strategies for Being Our Best Possible SEL Selves. And my hope is to unlock the power of healthy emotion regulation to help our kids, ourselves, and our society thrive. I want to say that we want to get the word out about this work. So if you are someone who enjoys using social media, please use our Instagram tags, which are there. And if you're interested in other forms of communication, you can go to our websites. Many of you know me for work that I do in social and emotional learning, and this is one of our signature tools. We call it the Mood Meter. And we've now made this publicly available to everyone. What I'd like you to do for a moment is just check in with how you're feeling. Here we are. It's Friday afternoon. Many of us have been at home for 2 weeks. And I just want you to check in with your feelings. Just take a moment. Maybe get comfortable in your seat, bring yourself into the present moment, and just ask yourself, what's my level of pleasantness right now? Am I feeling unpleasant today, or am I feeling more pleasant today? Maybe think about your level of energy right now. Are you feeling tired, or are you feeling full of energy? And very briefly, we have these 4 colored quadrants. We got yellow, red, blue, and green. Just take a moment. Think about, what color are you in today? How are you feeling? Might you come up with a word to describe how you're feeling right now? Maybe you have more than one feeling. Maybe you have 2 or 3 feelings. Me, for example, I'm excited to be doing this webinar and proud to be part of CASEL. I'm also really tired. I have not had good sleep patterns these last 2 weeks. Slightly overwhelmed. So many of you probably have multiple feelings. And now I'm going to ask you to take a nice long inhale and an exhale and just bring yourself back to the moment. And think about what you need to best support you to get through this hour with us. My hope is I'm going to be your co-regulator. My job is to hopefully inspire you, hopefully to make you feel supported and connected to this CASEL Cares initiative. And on that note, what I wanted to share with you are some of the data that we collected. So this is previous data. A couple of years ago, we did a national study with educators, and what we found was frustration was the #1 emotion that teachers said they felt. And so we were curious to find out, what are teachers feeling right now? So many of you participated in this survey, and I'm about to share with you the results of our study of about 4,000 teachers just over the last couple of days. And as you can see, frustration has seemed to gotten smaller, but yet anxiety, worry, uncertainty, being overwhelmed and concerned. There are some positive feelings in there. It was funny, I was asking somebody who was going to be participating in this webinar, like, how do you feel? And she goes, well, I'm really overwhelmed, I'm really anxious, but I'm actually feeling hopeful and optimistic because, I think this is going to be something that we can all enjoy and have fun with. But for the most part, as you can see, our nation, and I don't think these are just our teachers, most of us are in a difficult place emotionally. And so when you look at this tool and you place these emotions on it, what you see is that unfortunately right now we're emotionally out of balance. And what I mean specifically about that is that we're spending a lot of time in those red and blue emotions, meaning we're activated or we're deactivated, but we're mostly feeling these unpleasant feelings. And when we ask people, how do you want to feel? They do tell us they want to feel feelings like excited and happy and joyful and fulfilled and calm and satisfied. But right now it's probably not possible to feel those emotions all the time. And so the question is, how can we have greater emotional balance over the next couple of weeks? And how can we maybe support ourselves in being comfortable in that red and blue space? Because it's probably not going to be that easy to just push our red and blue feelings aside, and we certainly don't want to suppress them. Now, I wanted us to start off in a little bit of an uncomfortable place. And I don't know about you, but I've had difficulty regulating over the last couple of days. Give you one example. I've been cooking dinner, and my partner and my mother-in-law were offering me feedback that I didn't ask for about the meal. And I was like, can't you just be grateful that I'm cooking? And it ended up being an interesting evening. And I probably had about 40 of those incidents over the last week. So my unhelpful strategy has been kind of a little bit higher voice and yelling. I've done some ruminating at night, worrying about different things. What about you? What are your unhelpful strategies that you're using right now? What are the strategies that you're using that are not necessarily supporting your well-being? Just take a moment. If you want to be transparent with the world, you can even type them in. We're not going to judge you, that's for sure. So what are some of those unhelpful strategies that you notice yourself using? Oops. Sorry about that. Let me jump back. So I see a lot of wine drinkers, a lot of eaters, obsessive eating, overthinking, worrying, too much social media, watching too much news, stress eating, avoiding, oversleeping, too much screen time. So when we think about these unhelpful strategies, do these look familiar to you? Ruminating and worrying and avoiding and denying and suppressing and blaming. maybe obsessing on things, procrastinating, losing our temper, eating poorly, not exercising, problems, sleeping, excessive drinking, and so on. Take a moment and think about, where did you learn these strategies? Where did you learn these unhelpful strategies? Well, I've got a lot of unhelpful strategies. Where did you learn these strategies? Where did they come from? Did you have to get your bachelor's degree in education or whatever you studied to learn these strategies? Maybe you got a master's degree in rumination or a PhD in procrastination. Most of us learn them from where? What are we learning here? From my mom and dad, from television, from childhood, from my parents, from my parents, from my parents. And so one of the goals of today's webinar is to think about how we can employ healthy emotion regulation strategies. So we're going to jump there right now. I just wanted to share this one that I thought was really funny. So for our center at Yale, I did a webinar yesterday, and I was asking all these questions up front, and somebody typed in, I joined this webinar to listen to a professor teach me about something, not to be asked so many questions, just do your presentation. I just thought that was interesting. What we know about unhelpful strategies is the following, right? We learn them early in life, from people who probably didn't have a lot of training in social and emotional learning. We know that those unhelpful strategies like drinking too much alcohol and not exercising and sleeping too late, they don't require that much effort. It's pretty easy to just stay in bed. It's pretty easy to just eat the junk food. Oftentimes they become bad habits and that we're not even aware we're doing them. The challenge is they provide immediate relief, hence why we develop these bad habits. But here's the problem. The impact is not so great, right? They're harmful to ourselves and others. They don't solve the problem. They negatively impact our relationships. They derail us from achieving our goals. And they also decrease our health and well-being. And here's the other problem, is that when we are depleted of our resources, like many of us are feeling right now, like we're just sleeping, we're not sleeping enough, we have a new normal that we're dealing with, we're even more likely to use poor strategies. So the goal of today's webinar is to teach you healthy emotion regulation strategies so that we can move from our automatic, habitual, unhelpful strategies that are harmful to our deliberate strategies that are helpful, which I think is a major goal of social and emotional learning. That brings me to just the Center for Emotional Intelligence that I have the privilege to direct. Our overarching mission is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And the reason why we care about how you feel is because we know that how you're feeling right now in your homes, it's affecting all the things that matter for your health and well-being. It's affecting your attention, memory, and learning. It's affecting the decisions you're making about, again, the strategies you're using to whether you drink that extra glass of wine or beer, whether you get your exercise in, whether you decide to eat healthy, whether you decide to shift your thinking. We certainly know it's affecting our relationships qualities. Think about that. As I said earlier, we have this new contract with our families. We're with each other all day long. I don't know about you, but I'm not used to working from home. I'm used to being on trains and planes and running the center and going around and doing presentations. And now it's like all day long. It is difficult. And you learn new things about people when you're with them for 2 weeks straight. The fourth is physical and mental health, right? We've got to take care of ourselves. This has to be not an opportunity to be a self-saboteur, but really an opportunity for us to help ourselves and the people we love be healthy. And finally, we have students at home. They're trying to be academically, involved. We're trying to maybe do some creativity work. We're going to need these skills to help us manage this new learning environment because it is a different place that we're living in right now. And we have to adapt to that by using healthy strategies. So I want to ask you right now, many of you are unfamiliar maybe with our work in particular. And one thing I write a lot about is that I see in the world that there are people who are emotion scientists and there are people who are emotion judges. And I want to ask you, where are you right now with yourself, with your family? Are you open to all emotions? Are you accepting all of the feelings that you're having right now? Are you saying, I'm weak because I'm anxious? The emotion judge sees anxiety as a weakness. The emotion scientist is curious about it. Do you recognize that these are ephemeral states, that these are not permanent? It's like when we have a toothache, we think it's permanent, but eventually it does go away. The judge says, this is permanent. I'm a mess. It's never going to get better. Are you open, curious, and reflective, or are you more critical? Are you in learner mode, or are you just telling everybody how they're feeling? Are you trying to get specific and granular? Or are you clumping? And I think importantly, like when you're failing at regulating, like I have done about 50 times in the last week, do you say to yourself, this is temporary? Like for me, I say to myself something, Mark, yeah, you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence, but like these are tough times and you got to just give yourself the permission to fail and forgive. And tomorrow you're going to do better. Or do I just say to myself, you know what, it's hopeless. This is who I am now and it's never going to get any better. So take a moment, think about yourself. Where are you? Are you the emotion scientist? Are you the emotion judge? Maybe you are a scientist with some people and a judge with other people. So what is healthy emotion regulation from the perspective of an emotion scientist? We're going to define emotion regulation as the thoughts and the actions that we use to prevent unwanted emotions, to reduce the difficult ones, to create ones that we want to have. Right now, think about that. When we're with each other all day, sometimes we have to just think, all right, we're going to do something fun. We're just going to generate some positivity and joy, maintain our feelings, or even enhance them. And from an emotional intelligence perspective, importantly, we do all this work in emotion management to promote well-being, to build positive relationships, to make good decisions, and to attain our goals in life. There's a number of forms of regulation that we could talk about. Self-regulation, which is about me managing my own feelings. That's going to be the primary goal of this webinar. But there are other forms of regulation, co-regulation, right? The back and forth between you and your partner or you and your child, or interpersonal regulation, which are the strategies that we would help other people use. Today's focus primarily is going to be self-regulation, but I promise you that all these strategies that I'm going to teach you can be used for the co and the interpersonal regulation. Few things to think about, though, when we go into emotion regulation. It is developmental. So not every strategy is appropriate for people of all ages, right? It's the reason why teenagers can't drive with other teenagers right away, because we know if they're in the car with 3 or 4 people, they're going to go faster than they should. The second is that we've got to learn these things. In the spirit of complete transparency, I've been in therapy for many, many years of my life, from when I was a kid to a teenager to earlier in my adult life, and I never learned strategies. I learned a lot about my mother, I can tell you that. I had these amazing, dreams, and I learned all these weird attachment things that I had, but I never learned the skills of how to regulate, like reappraisal. I didn't even know what that was until I was a graduate student studying emotions. The third is that emotion regulation requires practice. Like, we all fail, and strategies have to become healthy habits. Like, think about what it takes to become a good writer. When I interview writers, they say to me, I get up every morning and I write for 2-3 hours straight. How much time do we spend each day thinking about how we're feeling and regulating our feelings? And importantly, we're going to have to learn to evaluate and refine our strategies. We're going to have to ask ourselves as scientists, is what I'm doing, is that whine, is that non-exercise, is that yelling and screaming and blaming actually helping me have greater well-being, or is it getting in the way? And we need a lot of strategies, because sometimes plan A doesn't work. The best example, I apologized the other day and my apology wasn't accepted. I was like, what are you talking about here? And so I had to plan B, plan C. This is hard work. A few other things before we jump into the strategies themselves. Emotion regulation is specific to the feeling. So not all emotions are created equal, right? Anxiety and stress right now is going to be harder to regulate than probably other emotions. We have to really understand that there is not a one strategy fits all model here. That strategies are rooted in personality. They're rooted in family background and culture. So One example from my own life is that people see me as being outgoing and social. I'm an introvert. And so I need strategies that are more restorative, strategies that support me in having quiet time. I don't do well in social strategies. So we have to recognize that the strategies that we're going to use for ourselves and the strategies that we're going to help other people with are rooted in personality, family background, and culture. And then, of course, all these things vary. Think about it. Do you regulate better at work than at home? Is it easier with some friends than others? And for our educators, are we permitting the children in our classrooms to even use these strategies? Last thing I want to say before we jump into the real meat here is that there's no correctness here, which I think makes this work very difficult for people. And the reason why I say that is that we're so accustomed in education to thinking of 4 + 4 = 8, 5 - 2 = 3, and there's a correct answer. There's no correctness here. It's us becoming these compassionate scientists that are exploring the world and learning strategies that work for us and other people. It's not about right or wrong. It's about exploring and trying. So with that said, right now, what I learned from the data was that people really are looking for strategies to manage anxiety and stress. That was the #1 theme that came up from the data. And as we think about stress, we have to acknowledge what stress is, right? Stress comes to us because we see things as unpredictable, we feel like we don't have control, and we think it's going to be on and on and on forever. Just like many of us might feel right now about the COVID-19 experience or coronavirus. So there are different types of stress. There's positive stress. Some of the stress that I had, for example, working with CASEL, I put together this webinar, was in that flow state, like really trying to do something that's going to be helpful. That's good stress. We want that stress. But unfortunately, we have acute stress, distress, and chronic or toxic stress. And these are stressors, like everyday stressors that can get in the way of our performance, but we do pretty well with them in the acute area. But the chronic or toxic stress is the real tough stuff, right? When stresses are ever present, right, and impacting our functioning. So today's goal is to really help you think through all of these strategies. And I know that there's a lot here, but the good news is that you're going to get this recording and all this content will be with you. So we're going to go through brief experiences today, and then you're going to get to take this with you. We're going to go through physiological regulation. We're going to think about self-care. We're going to think about relationships, how we manage our thoughts, how we manage our life smartly, how it's important to just do things that we enjoy, even in these difficult times, and then forgiveness, which I'm still working on. So we're going to start off with the basics, just basically breathing. A few things about this. There are some misconceptions about mindful breathing. I think the big one is that people think it's a religion. There's no religion around breathing, right? We were born breathing and we will breathe until our last moments. Breathing is just breathing. Other misconceptions that it's only used to regulate negative emotions or to prolong positive ones, or that we have to do this particular breathing with these different symbols. None of that is necessary. Some clarifications, right? The goal of mindful breathing is to cultivate deeper awareness of our experiences. And when we breathe mindfully, right, we just breathe normally as we watch it. So I've been doing a lot of talking, and guess what? Now I'm going to do some pausing. I'm going to ask you first, honestly, how often do you just pause and breathe? Really? How many times in the last week have you just said, you know what? I need 5 minutes to myself. I'm going to go sit on the couch. I'm going to sit in the wherever, and I'm going to take some breaths and just allow myself to deactivate and be present. I'm curious. How many of you are doing that? Okay. Now, some information about breathing. Most of the time we breathe automatically. We don't, if we had to control our breath every day, we'd go crazy, right? We're just breathing. It's an automatic process. But when we do it voluntarily, when we decide to deliberately slow our breath, right, that we overtake the metabolic part and it activates our motor cortex. This all is in the service of helping us to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the soothing system, and inhibit the sympathetic nervous system, which is where all that cortisol is pumping. In addition, it improves our respiratory and cardiovascular function. The impact: greater focus and attention, less chatter, better functioning, list goes on. So everyone, I know that you probably didn't expect to be doing a breathing exercise in a webinar, but guess what? You are. So we're going to try this together. And I know some of you are going to get this. This is where your distraction strategy might come in. You're going to start texting somebody or looking at your email. I'm going to ask you to give yourself the permission to pause. Just do it. Be with us right now. Just get comfortable in your seat and pause. Just take a breath. Whatever is comfortable for you. Maybe put a gentle smile on your face, even if you're stressed. There is something called the facial feedback hypothesis, which is that the muscles on our face interact with our brains, and if we put a gentle smile, it makes us a little harder to have negative thoughts. I'm going to share with you my favorite breathing exercise. It's one that I learned over 30 years ago from a mindfulness teacher named Thich Nhat Hanh. And it's so simple that it's ridiculous, but it helps me throughout the day. And it's my go-to strategy for when I'm having difficulty sleeping. I don't have trouble sleeping, I have trouble falling asleep. And my brain goes on and on and on. So I'm going to go with our phrase on the bottom. If I can ask everyone to get good posture. And I'm going to ask you to take an inhale. And when I say the word in, we're going to breathe in. And when I say the word out, we're going to say the word out. And then we're going to go deep and slow and calm and ease. And then finally, we're going to put a little smile and we're just going to release. Together with me, please. However way you want to put your eyes is fine. We're going to go in and out and breathe in and say deep and breathe out and say slow. This is all in your mind. Breathe in and say calm. Breathe out and say ease. Breathe in with a little gentle smile on your face. And then let it go and say release. So before I move on, that was about 1 minute, if that. I just want to get some honest feedback. What did it feel like? Honestly, just type some ideas in. What did it feel like? Somebody wrote amazing. Releasing, comforting, relaxing, calming. It doesn't cost any money to take time to breathe. Right? Everything that I'm going to be sharing with you today is free. Your breathing is free. All strategies are free. Next, we're going to jump into self-care, nutrition, sleep, and exercise. So a few things about taking care of ourselves. Remember, in times like this, we want to have a strong immune system. We want to have good nutrition. You got to drink water. You got to limit your caffeine and alcohol intake. I'm sorry to be the deliverer of that. I'm drinking way more coffee than I ever have, and today was my day. Like, Mark, you got to cut it out. We also are drinking wine with dinner every night. I'm like, we got to cut down. Try to avoid processed foods if you can, right? When we're stressed, we're more likely to turn to high-fat, high-sugar foods. Take your vitamins. And try to avoid getting hangry, right? We know that glucose, right, is the only fuel used by the brain. But importantly, our brain doesn't produce glucose. That means that we get our energy from eating, but it's only eating right here in particular healthy carbs. You want to put in healthy carbs throughout the day. Not, don't go crazy because you're on a carb-free diet and everybody's doing keto and shmito. That's fine. You got to eat a little carbs to give yourself that brain energy. It also helps to improve your memory. How about sleep? Healthy sleep includes both duration and quality, right? Poor sleep equals poor restoration equals poor functioning. Few tips. Can you try no devices for 1 hour before sleep? I promised myself yesterday that I was going to put my device in my bathroom so that I could not be woken up by my alarm and check my email in the middle of the night and wake up checking my email. Giving myself that space, that freedom. Can you do something like that? Maybe do a little light stretching or even take a warm shower or bath before bed. It helps to deactivate, get you settled for bed. The reason why this matters is that inadequate or excessive sleep increases our anxious symptoms, fatigue and depressive symptoms. We know that when we have unhealthy sleep, we're a little bit more hostile and tense. Our resources are depleted, and it also disrupts our cognitive functioning. And then there's exercise, right? We've got to keep our body strong. As a matter of fact, Tim, I saw you did a piece on Instagram about this yesterday. It is so important that we keep our body strong. Unfortunately, obesity is at around 40% in our nation. About 20% of our children and adolescents are obese. You've got to build in an exercise routine. It's harder when you don't have a routine. So the question is, how are you fitting it in? Is it in the morning? Is it in your afternoon break? Is it in the evening? Because the research is clear. When you reduce, or when you not reduce, when you have the release of endorphins, when you exercise, you're less anxious, you're less depressed, you're less stressed, it increases your self-esteem and your concentration and attentiveness. One study that I really like showed that 50% of participants engaged in an aerobic exercise, the others did business as usual, and then they were exposed to a stressor. And guess what? The people who had just finished exercising were kinder and more compassionate and had fewer negative feelings, even when they were stressed out by somebody. So there is real biology to the benefits of exercise. So I'm begging you to fit it in. Next, we're going to turn to positive relationships. We all know this. We have a basic need to be seen, to be heard, and to be met. The mere presence of a caring adult reduces the effects of stress and helps to reduce negative emotions. But we need to be mindful that we're now forced in our relationship with family members. It's a new social contract. In our approach to social and emotional, and we ask people to build a family charter. It doesn't require a lot of training. Just have a conversation about how you want to feel at the dinner table. Just go around and say, how do you want to feel this week? How do you want to feel this weekend? What can we do to support the feelings that we all want to have more of? And I just want to share that our research in schools shows that 50% of teachers say they have strong relationships with their students, which is not enough. But only 34% of our students agree. So that's 2/3 of our nation's youth that are saying they don't feel they have a strong relationship with an adult in their school. For those of you who read my book or know my story, I was blessed in life. I had parents who loved me, but they were not there for me. They had their own challenges. My mom had a lot of anxiety. My father had a lot of anger. They were trying to figure out their own ability to regulate, sort of. And when I was struggling as a child from my own trauma and from bullying, and I had terrible anxiety problems, eating disorder even at one point in my life, there was one adult there for me. He was my Uncle Marvin. And he was that compassionate emotion scientist. He was that person who just said, hey, Mark, what's going on? And what I want to say here that he did that no one else did was he didn't try to shift me out of my feelings. He wasn't saying, why are you so stressed and why are you so anxious and you shouldn't be that way? He just listened. He just cared. Let me ask you, do you have someone in your life who is your Uncle Marvin? Who might that person be? Have you connected with them during these difficult times? Have you communicated with them? And importantly, for whom are you an Uncle Marvin? Who are you providing that unconditional love and support for? Just take a moment. Think about who might you reach out to? Who might you give your attention to? Because oftentimes when we're going crazy in our own heads from stress and anxiety, a great strategy is just reaching out to someone else and taking care of them. The next area that we're going to jump into is managing our thoughts. You know that 40% of our well-being has to do with our outlook on life, right? Our negative self-talk often starts early, often by others who define our reality for us, right? Think about that. You know, when I asked you that question earlier, a lot of you said your parents. You learn your unhelpful strategies from your parents. I'll give you mine. So my mother, whenever she was saying, oh, I'm having a breakdown, and lo and behold, I'm 50 years old now, and about 3 weeks ago, I was having just completely overwhelmed, and I'm like, oh, I'm having a breakdown. I'm like, oh shit, there goes mommy again. So all of us, right, think about this. We have learned these strategies. We have practiced these strategies, for me, 45, 50 years of my life. So part of healthy emotion regulation is going to be changing the conversation that we have with ourselves. And that means we're going to have to do a little bit of unlearning and then replace that with the stuff that's going to help us have greater self-compassion and manage our emotions more effectively. Because you can't just tell someone to stop thinking that way. It doesn't work. So with the stress that we're having with COVID-19, what's happening in our communities, right? It's that dangerous trio. It's unpredictable, it's uncontrollable, it feels like it's going to last forever. But take into consideration Eckhart Tolle's quote, right? You can't cope with the future. You can only deal with the present, right? Chronic stress is when we're sensing danger around the clock. It makes us irrational. We've seen this on television, right? People spraying people, gargling with Clorox, panic buying up toilet paper, saying mean or hurtful things, right? And there's another big problem with this. Our brains lie to us. It's amazing. Our brains literally lie to us. So when we don't have accurate information, our brain makes it up. The best example I have from my life is turbulence. I fly a lot, but I get anxious every time I get on a plane, like, and my cousin is a pilot and I said to him, Rich, I can't, blah, blah, blah. And he said to me, Mark, didn't you know there's never been an accident from turbulence? I'm like, really? No, I didn't know that. Wow, that's interesting. I was basing all my anxiety on a lack of information. Now, every time I get on a plane and I feel like it's going crazy and it's whatever, it's raining or there's some turbulence, I just say, Mark, there's never been an accident from turbulence. And I'm like, oh, okay, give me another glass of wine. No, just kidding. So we're going to focus today on positive self-talk and positive reappraisal. Saying encouraging words in our head about ourselves and the world around us. It helps, by the way, to refer to yourself in the third person. So for example, oftentimes I'm like, Mark, or I'm going to lose it. What we say to ourselves is, wait a minute, Mark, you're supposed to be the feelings master. You can get through this. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do right now. Take a moment and think about one or two of the phrases that you say to yourself in these difficult times that might not be helpful. Take a moment, please. Make this about you right now. What are your go-to unhelpful ways of thinking when you get stressed, when you get anxious? What do you say to yourself? And you can take a moment and think about how you could shift that. And as I say here, this idea of referring to yourself in a third person introduces an interesting concept called psychological distancing. When you're caught with your feelings, you get lost sometimes. So what you have to do is literally take a breath and say, Mark, you can get through this. Mark, this feeling is impermanent. When I'm completely stressed out, because I am a believer in this idea of emotions are ephemeral and impermanent, which they are, I take a breath and I say, Mark, you've had this anxiety for 40 years of your life before you've gone to bed. You know it's going to go away in the morning. It's impermanent. And then all of a sudden, there's a sense of freedom. Another strategy is positive reappraisal. This is putting a different spin on it. So the self-talk is saying, you know, you can get through this. It's impermanent. Take the high road. The reappraisal is saying, can I look at this from another lens? So for example, when your significant other or child is driving you out of your mind and you're saying to yourself, I hate being a parent, or I can't stand this online learning. Maybe you can say to yourself, my goodness, like a lot of people are struggling with this online learning. My goodness, my child has a whole new way of interacting with the world. What can I do to be supportive? Do you see how that puts another whole twist on it? So I'm going to encourage you over the next week to really take that breath. And when you notice yourself having that negative self-talk, try to switch it to positive self-talk, or try to reappraise it, look at it from another lens. We're going to go over to managing your life smartly. Here's another interesting strategy. Can you be a preventionist and not an interventionist? Think about this. We can take actions that might make it more or less likely we'll end up in a situation that might give use to anxiety. So here are some tips. Think about this. Don't surround yourself with people who make you anxious. Do surround yourself with people who are calming. Here's another no-brainer strategy. Don't check social media or watch the news all day. Do stay informed. So can you create the boundaries for yourself? I know for me, the first week, I was literally sitting on my kitchen stool with the refrigerator there and the TV there, and I was all day long. The numbers, I was going nuts. And I had to just create rules for myself, because otherwise I would just be in constant state of uncertainty and anger, which relates to this idea of having a routine, right? Can you create consistency in wake up time, in meals and exercise, work schedule, playtime, etc.? When we have too much time on our hands, our brains make up the stories. Think about it. If you're just sitting and not doing, your brain has the opportunity to make all these weird connections that are not going to be necessarily helpful for you. So my question is, what does your routine look like right now? Are you setting yourself up for success in this new normal at home? Are you creating a routine for wake up, for meals, for exercise, your work schedule, your playtime, whatever that looks like for you? Ask yourself right now, how can you create a better routine? How can you manage your life more smartly to support you over the next couple of weeks? Finally, even in these difficult times, we got to find ways to have fun. And I don't believe we give ourselves the permission to have fun. I don't think that we really understand how the brain works, believe it or not. We think that working all the time or problem solving, we're going to find the solution. As a professor here at Yale, you know, my students are used to like being under pressure, right? They think they have to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning to generate ideas. It doesn't work, right? When you give yourself the permission to take a walk, to just do something you enjoy, all of a sudden the idea comes. I can't tell you how I'm a yoga person. I'm oftentimes in a pose and I'm like, oh, wow, finally I get the idea. Of course, then I want to take that pad out and start writing, which is not very helpful, so I don't do it. But you get what I'm talking about here. That we got to give ourselves the permission to have freedom and space. So these are just a number of ideas, right? I'm not going to read them all out, but take a walk, try a new routine, have fun with it, sing while you're making your bed, right? Try a new recipe, write a gratitude letter to that person who's inspired you, who is your Uncle Marvin. Try a new recipe, watch a new show, read a new book, listen to a new podcast. The list goes on. We're going to send you dozens of ideas for what you can do in these times to have creativity in your downtime. So as we come to a close, what I'm going to ask you to do is take a moment and think about the strategies that we discussed today. Which ones resonate with you the most? Is it the mindful breathing? Is it more self-care? Is it getting better sleep? Is it eating healthier? Is it building in the time for exercise? Is it thinking about your relationships and what you might do to have healthier bonding and closer attachments and managing your home life? Is it more of the cognitive strategies? Is it having better routines? Is it just making time to do things you enjoy? Last weekend, we took a ride to the beach. I'm very fortunate. I live about 5 minutes from the ocean, although you never know it in New Haven, Connecticut. And we just watched the sunset. I was like, where am I? It was the most beautiful time just to give our family an opportunity to spend 10 minutes just watching the sunset amongst all the chaos. So here's what I need you to do before we close. I need you to make a commitment, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time either. I need you to take something from today and commit to it. Which one of these areas do you want to try to enhance, improve upon? Because the truth is, you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your loved ones. And if you're comfortable, I'm going to ask you to make your commitment or expose your commitment or make yourself accountable for your commitment. Maybe you can type it into our box right now. What are you committing to? Is it changing the story in your head? Is it pausing and breathing? More self-care? Better relationships? Doing things you enjoy? Please take a moment to jot down your strategy. As you're doing that, I love this picture. This is a boy in one of our classrooms who thought about his best self. And his best self was kind, hardworking, selfless, and determined. I was just blown away by that. A 4th grade boy. He saw his best self as kind, hardworking, selfless, and determined. So imagine you're this child. Right? What strategy are you going to commit to be more selfless, show your determination, show your hard work, and be kind and compassionate to yourself and others? A few things to bring our session to a close. 1, give yourselves and others the permission to feel all emotions. I wrote a book this year called Permission to Feel, and it was really about this idea of allowing ourselves to just feel. We don't have to shift. Oftentimes people are trying to help us to regulate. Healthy regulation doesn't mean not feeling. It's about accepting all feelings and just using them wisely. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be frustrated. Strive to become that emotion scientist and not an emotion judge. Remember, we're all in this together. And as we said in the beginning, physical distance does not mean psychological distance. Try to be an Uncle Marvin for someone. Appreciate that developing emotion regulation skills can be harder than learning traditional hard skills. It's life's work. I also want to say you've got to be open to apologizing. I've gotten really good at it this week. Forgiving and repairing, and also seeking the help if it's necessary. And lastly, what I want to say is, please don't give up on yourselves when you're feeling this way. I know when we get overwhelmed with stress and anxiety, we feel it's going to be permanent, it's going to be forever. It's not. And it will be dealt with more effectively if you can try some of the strategies that I share with you today. So my last words to you for today are from one of my heroes, Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And on behalf of CASEL and the Center for Emotional Intelligence, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone who joined today. I wish you the best in this journey of healthy emotion regulation. And just for research and for articles and free papers, you can go to my website, our center website. That's my contact information, my assistant, Michelle. And now I'm going to turn it over to my amazing colleagues at CASEL to bring our session to a close. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. I don't know about the rest of you, but I certainly appreciated the calming force that Mark has, and really appreciate you sharing your insights and wisdom. We just wanted to close the session by letting you all know that we are curating resources from other partners and friends who have a lot to offer for parents, caregivers, educators, pretty much anybody that's working with children. If you go to the website, you can find those resources there. We will be updating them regularly, so check back. And if there are specific things that you're looking for, do let us know. Also, next week, we are continuing the CASEL Cares agenda, and we are hosting Jennifer Miller. And Jennifer Miller is somebody who's been working with children and educators, adults working with children for 25 years. She's an expert on SEL and parenting, and will be live with us next Friday, same time. So please do register and fill out the survey for future ideas and topics, so that we can continue to put on the programming that you find most helpful. I think that is it. We will be sharing recorded versions, and Emily, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karen and Mark and Tim, who was with us earlier. And thanks so much, everyone, for taking time out of what I know is a busy and stressful time. As Karen said, it definitely was wonderful to be here with everyone, particularly Mark, and walking us through these great strategies. You will be getting the recording, as Karen said, as well as the slide deck. So all of these resources will be at your fingertips. We'll be sending that email out tomorrow. So just keep an eye out for it. And you are welcome to share it with others. We've had a lot of questions around if folks can share that with their colleagues and their friends, and absolutely share it far and wide. We all need these strategies right now. Tim, did you want to say something before we maybe try to take one or two questions that have come in?
I just want to say thank you, Mark. I'm so relaxed right now. I'm probably not going to work for the next week or two. And,
That's
I'm
good. We can
thrilled.
have
I'm going to
FaceTime
tell
meetings.
everybody I work with that I have figured out the key to emotional self-regulation, and it involves relaxing. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks, Tim.
Yes.
So yes, from Tim, myself, Karen, any questions you have for me about the webinar or anything for CASEL, please, maybe Emily, you can support us in the questions, and we can respond.
Yes, we've had quite a few questions that have come in, so we'll hang on for a few extra minutes to take those, and then ones that we can't get to, we will try to get back with you on. But again, folks, you will get the recording and the slide deck. That is a common question that's coming in right now. So, but one that came in earlier was, Mark, do you have any specific strategies for single people who are living alone and who are especially physically distanced from people right now? This person's found a lot of things out there with suggestions for families, but not so much for single people dealing with this situation.
Sure. I think there's a number of things you can do. You know, I have a lot of single friends in New York City. They're doing, for example, virtual meals together. So they do the same recipe. You know, everybody's cooking the same thing, and then they sit down, they give each other a cheers over dinner with wine. It's a nice way to spend an hour, you know, in relationship. You can do that with one friend. You can do that with multiple friends. So that's just one idea. I know something that we did. I have an aunt who lives in Florida. I've got a cousin who lives in California. We've never really, I mean, maybe once every couple of years we get together for a Thanksgiving or something. But amazingly so, we decided as a family we're going to do this like virtual Skype meeting, free. And it was just incredible to just like we spent from 8 till 10 p.m. one night just like chatting about stuff that we'd never talk about. So what I would say is just use this opportunity, use this as an opportunity to be creative. Think about the people you want to connect with and just make a dinner meeting twice a week.
Those are some great suggestions. And yes, I'm definitely finding myself connecting with people who I haven't taken the time to connect with in a long while. So that is a good opportunity. Could you just remind us what the hypothesis was called between smiling and breathing?
Oh, it's called the facial feedback hypothesis. So the idea is that the studies that were done originally, I'll just show everyone, if you do this with a pen like this and you press your lips, which is kind of an angry face, when you're judging things, you judge them, you're more angry, you're more critical. And then they did studies where you put a little smile on your face like this, and they realized that people were judging things as being, more amusing. So the point behind that is that our brains and our physiology speak to one another. And so one way of experiencing more pleasant emotions is monitoring your facial expressions and trying to generate and smile more.
All right, thank you. I think that's a helpful suggestion, particularly if we don't always feel like smiling, can help us
Exactly.
lead us towards that emotion. So in this time of checking in with staff or other people, which is very important, but time is a commodity, do you have some authentic check-in suggestions that don't take most of the allotted meeting time or a lot of time out of a day, so that we can be compassionate but not spend all our time checking in?
It's funny, there are people who work in our center who come from the business world, and they always ask me, like, how much time do I got to spend talking about feelings? And like, more than you used to. But the Mood Meter tool, we make that available for free for schools. You can go online, type in Mood Meter, and you'll get like 550,000 versions of it. It's very simple. Use that at a meeting to just check in. What color are you in? What's your word? And then if you realize that people are in the red or the blue, what you can do is just have a conversation. Like, what can we do to help ourselves either be comfortable in that quadrant, or if we need to be green or yellow for a certain kind of task, let's think together about what we can do to help ourselves shift there. So it's a very simple process of just labeling and identifying, and then figuring out what do we need to experience the emotions that are going to be the most helpful for what our goals are.
Okay, great. We'll just take this last question, and I am sorry, folks, that we didn't have more time together, but we will try to get back to you. So working in a school where families are in overcrowded, low-income homes, our students often feel really stuck. Do you have any tips or strategies we can share to assist these families and students who can't escape in, different rooms of their homes?
Yeah. So I think it's about creating that routine, and creating that family charter, that we just have to be open and honest with each other. Everybody has different needs. And so I think the courage is to just have the conversation with our partners, with our families, and to generate ways of, creating space, even if it's a small space. This is my area, for my, where I can do my homework, where I can concentrate, where I can have my phone call. If there's a lot of people, creating a routine, where everybody gets the opportunity to make their phone call or to use the one laptop. The more it's scheduled, I think, the more helpful. And the more we are transparent with each other about how we're feeling and how we want to feel, and the more we work together to come up with the strategies. Somebody asked this question, about culture and background. The benefit of this work is that it is, by definition, culturally responsive, because I'm not going to be the knower or the teller of the strategy. What I want to do is I want to ask you, Emily, I want to ask Tim, I want to ask Karen, I want to ask whoever, my partner, my mother-in-law, how are you feeling? How do you want to feel? And what do you need? And it's always coming from the individual, learning from the individual what they need. And once we know what everyone's needs are, then we have to be willing to create that schedule or to create the opportunities for people to get their needs met.
Thank you. That was very good advice, along with the other wonderful advice that you've provided through the past hour. And we really appreciate your being here with us. And we appreciate CASEL for bringing Marc to us today, and for providing all of the resources that Karen mentioned are on the CASEL website. And also, we will be continuing this webinar series next Friday, as you see there on your screen. Registration is not up yet for it, so don't worry, you haven't missed out. We will send an email next week, and you'll be able to get signed up for that one. And we appreciate everyone's patience with the registration process and hiccups that happened today. We're all trying our hardest and doing our best in these extraordinary times, and so we appreciate patience. And hope that you will be able to join us next Friday. As I said, it's great to come together. So everyone, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, be safe, and go forward into your day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Wonderful to be with you.